Hey, what's up guys? World of Warcraft goes free to play. No, I'm just kidding. But BlizzCon happened this past weekend, and out of that came a lot of discussion about whether the game was going to go free to play. Now, we know it's not going free to play for this next expansion, which should come out in the next 6 to 8 months, but there's still the question about WoW's future. And this past weekend, there were a couple articles that came out where Mike Morhaime, who is the president and co-founder, and J. Allen Brack, the production director at Blizzard, both said in essentially the same language that WoW is not going to go free to play, primarily for the reason that it's not built to be free to play. So what I want to do in this video is explore that statement. I want to see if there's anything that Blizzard is not telling us, if there's anything in their corporate documents, in their annual report. And then I'm going to look at their financial statements and see whether the microtransactions that WoW currently has in the game are effective and whether there could be even the possibility of them going free to play with these types of microtransactions. And finally, I'm going to talk about what Mike Morhaime and J. Allen Brack meant when they said that WoW was not built to be free to play. And then talk about, even though it's still going to be a subscription-based game, what type of microtransactions you can expect to see in the game in the future, because they're definitely going to introduce more. Alright, I guess we'll start with the dry stuff first. I have Activision Blizzard's annual report to the shareholders, and I have their 10K form, which is what they file with the SEC every year. So the reports are actually very similar, but sometimes you can find some cool nuggets that are in one that don't make it into the other, and vice versa. So the first snippet I want to show you essentially says that they are attempting to shorten the release cycle, and they're trying to release content at a quicker pace. Now, if you're a fan of the game, that sounds great, and you might be thinking, why is it relevant to a discussion about a business model? But I'll show you that later, so just keep this in mind for now. Right in one of the very first sections about strategy, they say they are exploring new business models, including free-to-play games with monetization through in-game microtransactions. So keep in mind that this was released way early this year. So what has been released since then? Well, we have Hearthstone, which has gone into closed beta. We've had Heroes of the Storm announced, both of which are free-to-play games. So while this comment may have been a red flag earlier in the year, I think because they've announced Hearthstone and Heroes of the Storm, that the ambiguity has been reduced significantly, and the chances that they're talking about World of Warcraft with this statement are pretty slim. And now possibly the most damning evidence for WoW not going free to play. In the Blizzard strategy section, so this is not including Activision, they say, the very first sentence under strategy, they say, maintain and build upon our leadership position in the subscription-based MMORPG category. Now this might seem benign by itself, but the real beauty is in what they don't say. They don't say anything about trying out new business models or expanding their revenue streams. They say very clearly they want to maintain their leadership position in the sub-based market. Now, to further prove the validity of that statement, let's look at the next paragraph that I wanted to point out. So this paragraph says, we depend on a relatively small number of franchises for a significant portion of our revenues and profits. And what that means is they aren't well diversified in their titles. They only have 3 or 4, maybe 5 major titles. And so if one of those were to change significantly and take a big risk, i.e. if WoW were to go free to play, or try that, then because their revenues and profits are so sensitive to one game's performance, if it did poorly, it would be catastrophic for the company. And because I'm a finance guy and I like numbers, I decided to take a look at their financial statements and see if I could glean any information from that stuff. This actually has a lot of really cool information in it, but the statement that I was most interested in was revenue mix by platform. So I went through and found the number of subscribers at the end of each quarter, and then I divided the total WoW revenue by the number of subscribers, and I got the average revenue per subscriber for the quarter. And then I wanted to take a look at, even though WoW is a subscription-based game, if it went free to play, it would have to survive on microtransactions. So I wanted to see if the introduction of some microtransactions over the last couple of years has had any major impact on average revenue per user. Because when you talk about free-to-play games, average revenue per user and monthly active users are both incredibly important metrics. So here I've graphed the information. I have average revenue per user on the left-hand y-axis and subs on the right-hand y-axis, and it's just a time series of the last few years by quarter. And what I wanted to show with this analysis is essentially a trend, and you can see it with the bar graphs. It's sort of a very cyclical-like trend, and I think it's pretty apparent what's happening here. Of course, I don't have all the information to verify it, but here's my theory. So, back in Wrath of the Lich King, we had no microtransactions. The average revenue per user was a steady $27 or $28. But then Kata was released. And you have new content. You have players coming back to the game, they're getting excited about the game, they want to experience the game to its fullest extent. And so that's when people start to buy the extra stuff, is when Cataclysm drops. So there's a spike in average revenue per user. And then in quarter 4 of 2011, we see a huge drop in average revenue per user. It took me a few minutes to figure out what that was, but it's the annual pass. So that persists all the way until Mists of Pandaria. Eventually the annual pass expires for most people, and those who leave the game, and you can see those subscriber numbers drop from 10 to 9.6 all the way down to 7.6 where we are today. But there are two things happening here. You have the coinciding of subscribers going down, which means the denominator is shrinking, and of course the numerator is increasing because you have the release of Mists of Pandaria. People are excited for new content. They say, hey, I want a new mount. We have pet battles now. I want to buy a couple pets to pet battle with. So with the release of new content, once again we see a spike. So back to the main question of the video, can WoW go free to play? Well, this sort of proves that the WoW player base does react favorably to microtransactions, but strictly from a numbers standpoint, if WoW were to give up their subscription revenue and go purely free to play, depending on the average revenue per user of the free to play model, which it would most likely be a little lower than where it is with the subscription model because not everyone is obligated to pay $15 a month, they would have to nearly double their player base to get back to the same revenue numbers that they have today. Now, doubling your player base is hard enough, but the worst part is that WoW already has a huge market share in the MMO market, and I don't think there are enough players in the free-to-play marketplace that could make the transition over to WoW and make WoW's free-to-play model a success. Alright, well, if I haven't convinced you yet that WoW is not going to go free-to-play, let me just offer a few more nuggets. Remember Mike Morhaime and J. Allen Brack's quotes in which they said that WoW is not built for free-to-play? Now what they mean when they say that is not that, they don't have a microtransaction store ready to go, but rather every free-to-play game, when it is being built, has already decided what they're going to sell you. So some games will sell you cosmetic items, and some games will sell you, extra levels and extra content. But when they're designing the game, they make these specific choices to sort of push you in the direction of the microtransactions. And, many of these free-to-play mechanics that they are selling you and pushing you towards are very systemic, and they're very deeply ingrained within the systems in the game. And their point is that they would have to take a completely different approach to WoW from here on out, and they'd probably have to go back into the old content as well. Okay, so I think we've beaten the horse to death on the point that WoW is not going to go free to play. I think that between what I've shown you so far and the statements from Blizzard, it's pretty apparent. However, does that mean that they're just going to continue as a $15 a month subscription MMO? No, I highly doubt that. I think that they're going to start introducing more things into the store, more microtransactions, possibly cosmetic items, more mounts and pets, obviously. So let's quickly talk about a couple of things that they could introduce as microtransactions that would not negatively impact the game, that wouldn't be pay to win, but that they could still sell in their store. A couple items that I think would be okay would be obviously more aesthetic items like those headpieces that they sold. I could see them selling heirloom items, so if you don't want to grind out the currency for them, just purchase them. I mean, it's just leveling, it's not giving anyone an advantage, really. Recently they released a experience enhancer potion or something like that over in China. I could see them releasing something like that in the West as well. It's a time versus money thing, and there are people out there who want to play the game, but they don't see as much value in the leveling process. If they want to pay the money to save the time, that's their call. It doesn't really impact any other players in the game. And of course, something that was sort of announced at Warlords of Draenor was if you purchase the expansion, you boost one character to 90 for free. They haven't announced that they would sell this feature separately, but I mean, let's be honest, people would pay money for this. I personally would pay $20, $25, even $30 to get a guy up to 90 instantly. It all comes down to the individual player and how they value their time, and whether they'd be willing to pay to replace that leveling time. One last thing I want to talk about very briefly is the concept of a subscription game double dipping with microtransactions. Now, I agree that if there are art assets or, leveling content, that it should not be treated as a microtransaction in a subscription model. However, I think there are plenty of microtransactions that fall under the quality of life umbrella, and that's when you start getting into the conversation of time versus money.
Time is money, friend!
And you shouldn't feel like you're being cheated out of content if Blizzard were to start offering level 90 characters. You can do all of that in-game, it's just a matter of trading money for time. And since people are willing to pay for it, don't be surprised if Blizzard tries to sell it. Alright, well that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it at least somewhat informative. I certainly had a ton of fun doing the research and putting the video together. So if you have any suggestions or any comments, just leave them, and I'll see you next time.